Welcome to Applaa. Okay, today we are setting the stage for one of the most high-stakes hurdles aspiring medical and dental students face, the University Clinical Aptitude Test, or as we all know it, the UCAT. Over the next 8 to 10 minutes, we're going totally deep into the mechanics of this exam. Look, we all know the material itself is intellectually challenging, but the real enemy in the room, it isn't just the content, it's the ticking clock. The UCAT is, at its absolute core, a blistering test of your cognitive processing speed and your ability to make rapid, high-quality decisions under just immense pressure. But don't worry, because we're going to break down exactly how the absolute highest scores basically manipulate time to their advantage, giving you a massive edge on test day. If you're prepping for the UCAT, you probably already know that the intense time pressure can feel, well, completely overwhelming. It's incredibly common to look at a practice score and realize, no way, I didn't even get to the last 5 questions in that section. The truth is, it's not just about finding the right answer, it's about finding the right answer in seconds, consistently, for 2 straight hours. So today, we are going to learn how to actively beat that UCAT clock rather than letting it beat you. We'll unpack the psychological strategies and the hard mechanical shortcuts that will fundamentally change how you approach every single question type. Here is our visual roadmap for today's explainer. 1. The UCAT prep timeline. 2. Verbal reasoning speed strategies. 3. Decision-making logic anchors. 4. Quantitative reasoning mental math. And 5. On-screen calculator masterclass. We have a ton of powerful strategies to cover, so let's get right into it. All right, Section 1, the UCAT prep timeline. You know, a lot of students think pacing is something you only worry about on the actual exam day. But the truth is, mastering test pacing actually starts weeks before you ever set foot in the testing center. Mapping out the ideal trajectory reveals a pretty fascinating pattern in how top-tier students study. The highest-scoring candidates typically spend about 25 to 30 total hours preparing. But the real secret? It isn't just the sheer number of hours, it's the evolution of how those hours are spent. At the 6-week mark, your primary goal is strictly accuracy. You should be doing completely untimed tutorials to really understand the format, deconstruct the question logic, and build a rock-solid foundation. However, as you follow this path down to the 3-week mark, there is a massive psychologically crucial shift. You absolutely must step up your practice by moving away from untimed learning and strictly utilizing timed mock exams. Why is this so crucial? Because you have to build an internal stopwatch. You have to train your brain to naturally feel what 40 seconds actually feels like. Accuracy comes first, for sure, but introducing strict time constraints at that 3-week mark is exactly how you forge the mental stamina you need as test day approaches. Moving right along, Section 2, Verbal Reasoning Speed Strategies. This section demands that you process a massive amount of text in a remarkably short window, and frankly, it requires a completely different reading technique. A really common mistake candidates make is trying to speed read the text, which honestly often just translates to rushing, panicking, and entirely missing the critical keywords. What you actually want to employ is selective reading. Think about how professional writing is structured. Paragraphs almost universally use introductory sentences to orient the reader and concluding sentences to sum up the main point. Everything in the middle, usually just supporting evidence. By exclusively targeting these introductions and conclusions on your very first pass, you can accurately identify the core purpose of a paragraph in a matter of seconds. It's an absolute gold mine for building a mental map of the passage. That way, when a question asks for specific detail, you already know exactly which paragraph houses that information. You literally get to skip reading every single word in between. And you know, rushing also makes you blind to intentional traps, which is exactly how test makers separate the good scores from the truly great ones. You've got to train your brain to slow down just slightly and actively hunt for negative questions, words like not or except. Missing one of those completely flips the entire meaning of the question, and it'll lead you straight into a cleverly designed trap answer. Also, you need to rigorously watch out for totalizing language. Words like always, never, impossible, or must. Those words imply an absolute, unquestionable certainty. But in the nuanced world of medicine and science, absolute certainty is incredibly rare. Therefore, whenever you spot those words in an answer choice, it strongly suggests the statement is false. Spotting totalizing language instantly helps you confidently eliminate wrong answers without wasting your time on deep philosophical analysis. All right, Section 3, Decision-Making Logic Anchors. For this section, I want you to frame the logic puzzles as a sort of mini-mission. You're an investigator, and your only goal right at the very start is to find your first undeniable clue. Let's walk through these exact deductions step by step, because this is where your pasting is either won or lost. Step 1 is finding your anchor. An anchor is an absolute rule that fixes an exact value or position. For example, if you have 5 people in a line, an anchor rule would be Dev is in the first seat. The moment you fix that anchor, boom, 20% of your puzzle is instantly solved, and your overall solution space dramatically shrinks. Step 2 is hunting for consecutive pair rules, like Beth is seated immediately after Amir. These are your highest value puzzle pieces. You can take that Amir-Beth block and layer it directly around your fixed anchor. By establishing those firm boundaries first, testing the remaining placements in step 3 becomes infinitely faster. You aren't guessing anymore. You're simply plugging the last few pieces into the only holes left available. It's like a giant puzzle coming together. This brings us to a really brilliant tip from top scorers, the 10-second rule. If you're staring at a logic puzzle and you cannot identify a solid anchor clue within 10 seconds of reading the rules, flag the puzzle and move on. I repeat, do not let your ego keep you stuck. Test anxiety often triggers this terrible sunk cost fallacy, where you feel like you just must finish a puzzle because you already started reading it. But when you can't find an anchor quickly, it's almost always one of the harder, deliberately convoluted puzzle types designed specifically to drain your time. Flag it, save those undercoverable minutes, and go grab the easier points waiting for you elsewhere in the section. Which leads us to Section 4, Quantitative Reasoning, Mental Math. Let's pivot to a section where you have 36 questions and only 24 minutes to solve them. That equates to a blistering 40 seconds per question. You absolutely must rely on mental shortcuts here. When you're faced with a brilliantly illustrative data chart, ask yourself, what is your first instinct? If you said, start doing the math, hold on. A massive pitfall for high-achieving students is diving straight into calculations. Before you even touch a number or look at the on-screen calculator, you must read the labels, the titles, and the axes. Are the numbers listed in thousands? Are they raw figures or percentages? Misreading graph units is a catastrophic time waster. You'll end up doing all the complex math perfectly. Realize your calculated answer isn't in the multiple choice options, panic, and then you have to start the entire 40-second process all over again. Always read the context first. Once you've read that data context correctly, the real secret is keeping away from the on-screen calculator as much as physically possible for simple arithmetic. To pull this off, you need to aggressively memorize your fraction to decimal conversions. Knowing instantly that 1/8 is 12.5%, that 1/5 is 20%, that 1/3 is exactly 33.3%, or that 1/6 is 16.6% saves massive amounts of time compared to keying it all in. Also, look at the multiple choice options first. If the options are widely spread out, say 15, 45, 90, and 120, you don't even need a precise answer. You can comfortably round the values in the prompt to the nearest 10 or whole integer and just estimate. Mental estimation will get you to the correct answer in half the time it takes to click through an exact equation on the screen. Okay, Section 5, On-Screen Calculator Masterclass. Because, let's be real, estimation isn't always possible. There are times when those multiple choice answers are incredibly close together, and you really do need precise calculations. The overarching rule here is simple and urgent. Stop clicking the calculator with your mouse. Dragging a mouse cursor across the screen to click tiny buttons wastes about 2 to 3 seconds per question. Now, over 36 questions, that adds up to nearly 2 full minutes of purely wasted time. Insane, right? Instead, use these highly efficient keyboard shortcuts. Hit Alt+C to instantly open or close the calculator. Always use the physical number pad on your keyboard to enter digits. If you need to store a value for a complex multi-step equation, drop the mouse and hit P for memory, M to subtract from memory, and C to recall it. Use Alt+N to jump to the next question and Alt+F to flag. Forcing yourself to use your keyboard instead of your mouse is one of the easiest, most mechanical ways to buy back precious seconds on test day. To kind of tie this whole shebang together, consider this golden rule regarding logic puzzles, which brilliantly applies to the entire test. Leave negative rules until anchor rules have reduced the possibilities. This perfectly encapsulates the core strategy of the UCAT. Shrink the solution space. Whether it's finding an undeniable anchor in decision-making, spotting totalizing language to swiftly eliminate false answers in verbal reasoning, or aggressively estimating numbers to rule out wildly incorrect options in quant, your entire goal is to reduce the noise. Finding the right answer is always incredibly faster when there are simply fewer wrong answers standing in your way. Which leaves us with this final, vital question as you head back to your studies. Are you letting the clock control you, or are you controlling the clock? By intentionally utilizing selective reading,
enforcing that strict 10-second flagging rule to protect your ego, relying on mental math estimation, and mastering those keyboard shortcuts, you are taking those seconds back by force. You're moving from a passive test taker to a highly active one. You are taking total command of the test and ultimately your UCAT score. Implement these shortcuts into your timed mock exams this week and watch your pacing utterly transform. Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer, and hey, happy studying.